go. Week 12, which is week 3 of remote access, lockdown, virus, protection. Here we go. Little Metallica fuel. Yeah. That's some good stuff right there. Alright. This chapter 12 for you guys is got a lot of topics, a lot of things that you could really go in depth with. And since this is just an intro class, we're not obviously going to go in depth to too many of them. This chapter 12 is about living in prison and then release back to the community and programs that could supposedly help do that. Again, because it's just one chapter, because we don't have unlimited time and depth to go into this, we don't. We're going to talk briefly about some of this stuff. And then this has led to encourage you to take a corrections course. If you're going to do a 2-year degree in criminal justice through Front Range, you're eventually going to have to take a corrections course. We're going to run one in fall. I would encourage you to take it. We go in depth in a lot of these subjects. Probably half the class deals with just items that are going to be talked about in this chapter. So that'll tell you how important these items are, but how really briefly we just blow by them in this one section for this one part of class. Understand that at the state and federal level, we imprison about 1.6-ish Americans every year. Now that may sound a lot, and you can read things on the internet, and you can find anti-prison people that'll tell you. Then we incarcerate more people than, and then they'll put a whole list of countries out there. That's really disingenuous. You really can't compare how many people we incarcerate in prison with other countries that have different laws, different ideas, different ways of dealing with their population and how they keep law and order. Yeah, we may incarcerate more, but then we may live at a higher standard of living in reference to what we expect our citizens to do in reference to following the rules. We've chose to take a incapacitation approach to our main punishment philosophy. Other places deal with it in different ways. We have a different historical evolution of our country and how we got to where we are. Now, do we incarcerate people that shouldn't be incarcerated? Probably. Do we incarcerate people for certain crimes for longer than they should be incarcerated? Probably. And those are all areas that need reform. Everyone loves to talk about criminal justice reform and prison reform. Very few of them actually do anything about it. I think until President Trump a year ago signed the Prison Reform Act, it had been talked about by 3 previous presidents, which also means like 7 previous Congresses, and no one did anything about it. Everyone loves to talk about it as a political issue. Nobody loves to do anything about it. It's not popular to reform criminal justice in the prisons, because one of the things you're going to talk about is not incarcerating convicted felons for as long a period of time, or not incarcerating them at all. That usually doesn't go over big with the majority of Americans. We like the idea that if you commit a serious felony, that you're going to be taken out of society, and that we feel comfortable that you're not going to be a threat to us for a certain period of time. And so people love to talk about reform, but when you get right down to the specifics, what do you want to reform? How do you want to reform it? That's where the wheels come off on reform. Because most people are not willing to step forward and actually identify what they're willing to reform. So, this chapter looks at certain things. Looks at prison violence and the problem we have with prison violence. It talks about prison rape, both in men's and women's facilities. We have this idea because of TVs and movies that you go to prison, you're going to get raped. Less than 4% is the latest statistic of prisoners get sexually assaulted in prison. Now, how does that rate with people in general society? It's a little higher than most areas of general society. When it comes to women, it's lower than general society. But it's still not the number that most people want you to think it. One of the things you have to understand, most prisoners, high percentage of prisoners go to prison, do their time quietly, and get released. That's a fact. The murder rate in prison is less than the murder rate on the streets of any big city in America. But that's not the story that you get told through TV and movies and the news. They want you to think if you go to prison, you're going to get raped, and then you're going to get shanked with a sharpened toothbrush or something in the yard. That's not true for most prisoners. Again, most prisoners go to prison, do their time quietly, and are released. This chapter talks about those kind of things. It talks about the prison culture, the prison language. They call it argot. It talks about living in certain conditions, including living in Supermax. The chapter starts with a picture of a guy named Tommy Silverstein. At one point was considered the most dangerous prisoner in American prisons because of the prisoners he killed and because of the guards he killed. He was one of the prisoners in Supermax, Federal Supermax in Florence, Colorado. He has since died, so obviously he's not the most dangerous prisoner anymore. But he was for a while. You can read about his story through different outlets if you can find stuff about Tommy Silverstein. So this chapter talks a little bit about that concept, the Supermax, the lockdown 23-1 in Supermax facilities. It talks a little bit about the female prisoners and what they adjust to, how they adjust. The chapter wants to talk about different treatment programs. It talks about some of the substance abuse programs, rehabilitation programs, with education programs, with work programs. You can review all that stuff. I'm not going to go into every single one of those individually. One of the sections it spends a little time on is what they call cognitive behavioral therapy programs. We identified some years ago that through research, we had an idea that prisoners, criminals, committed crime for varied amounts of reasons. take a criminology course, again when we run in fall, and we explore what causes someone to commit crime. One of the areas that was really under-researched was an area that criminality, doing crime, may be about learned criminal behavior. You and I may not commit crime because we were taught not to commit crime. Through whatever system that was. Through your parents, through school, through your religion, through your friends, through whatever. Most people accept that that's the norm. There is a group of people that probably were never taught to think about committing crime the same way you were. Cognitive behavioral therapy tries to work on those things, to get people to work on re-teaching them how to think about crime. We get put into a situation and our first thought is not to commit a crime to get out of that situation. There are people whose first thoughts is, my response to these stimuluses in life is to commit a crime. Well, if we can change the way they think to respond to those stimuluses without committing a crime, then we've probably changed their criminality. That's what cognitive behavioral therapy does. It shows great promise in reference to changing people's criminal mind. The rest of this chapter, again, is just going to talk about some of those other kinds of input and different programs, different ways that we can try to stop your criminal behavior. Look at the PowerPoints related to this. Understand that we've got a exam number 4 coming up when you look at this chapter 12, week 12, in the content section of D2L. You'll notice that there's a study guide for exam 4. That'll be coming next week in week 13 stuff. So prepare for that. Know that you've got a discussion post, 3 posts that need to be done for week 13, and you have an assignment that needs to be done for week 13. All that's for this week. Look over the PowerPoints that are accompanying this chapter 12. Look through the chapter. Listen to this video. You should be fine.